So you've been trying so hard and nothing seems to stick. Well, maybe it's time for you to stop fighting yourself and start trusting your next step. If you're a woman who's reached a crossroads in life, perhaps, maybe you feel that something needs to change, but maybe you're not quite sure where to begin, then I'd love it if you'd stay with me for the next few minutes because I have something for you. So perhaps you're noticing yourself in some of these things here, noticing that need for change in your body, your energy, your life. Maybe your children, if you have them, need you less than they once did. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you are wondering what this next chapter is holding for you. Maybe you've reached a point in your career where, on paper, everything's looking great, but something just feels like it's missing. Or perhaps you've simply reached a point where you're thinking, I just can't do my life like this because the way you've been doing things so far just isn't what you want now. Maybe you're just ready to do things differently. And that doesn't need to mean that your life is terrible, but perhaps it means the way you've been doing things just isn't fitting who you're becoming right now. Maybe you've tried eating differently, exercising more, working harder, being stricter with yourself and starting again every Monday. You've read the books, you've listened to the podcasts, you know what you should be doing, and yet nothing just seems to stick anymore. And perhaps you're finding yourself wondering, maybe the problem is with you. And that's so easily done. Maybe you feel like you've lost your motivation, perhaps you're starting to call yourself lazy. Or maybe you're even finding yourself saying that this is just what it feels like to get older. But I don't think that's what's happening at all. So perhaps you recognise yourself here. General advice just doesn't seem to fit your life. Maybe you're searching for information in the books, in the podcasts, in all of your friends. Perhaps someone down the road has always got the next tip for you, but when you apply it to your life, it just falls apart within 5 minutes. But the thing is here that other people's plans can't account for your life. Not another person, not your neighbour, your friend, not even another coach. So if you're feeling like there's something to fix all the time, this is one of the reasons why, quite likely. And perhaps you even find that every time you find your rhythm in life, well, life happens. And yeah, it does. So I guess here is a good place to introduce myself. My name is Carly and I'm the curious human behind Still Space Hull, where we take a slower approach here. And for years I was absolutely known as the one who could hold everything together. I built a career I cared about. I had a home and family, and from the outside it all looked like it was going pretty well, but underneath all of that, I had that growing sense that something wasn't quite right. I remember reaching a point where I realised I needed to start looking after myself, and then discovering that I had no idea what I needed. I knew all the health advice. I was a dietitian. I understood nutrition. As a personal trainer, I understood exercise, but knowing what I should do, knowing what I needed, turned out to be two very different things. So I became fascinated at finding an answer to that question. And every time I thought I'd found part of the answer, another question just appeared once again. And that journey led me to bring together nutrition, strength, breathwork, and menopause coaching to create something that starts to finally join the dots together. And over the last 15 years, I've had the privilege of supporting many women, all from different kinds of backgrounds, with different kinds of things they wanted to work on, all going through different kinds of transitions. But what I noticed was the same patterns appearing again and again. So even though the reasons they came to see me were very varied, some wanted to lose weight, some wanted to feel stronger, some navigating menopause, chronic illness, some were navigating burnout, and many of them simply said, I just don't feel like me anymore. These all look like completely different conversations, but over the years, I kept noticing the same patterns. And once I began joining the dots, everything about the way I worked started to change. So today, I'd love to share with you 3 of those patterns with you. Because if you're standing at one of those crossroads, a perfect plan isn't going to help you move forward. If you're anything like the women I work with, you've probably tried all that already, more than once. And most of the women I work with already know what they think they should be doing. They're not looking for more information. They're just looking for somewhere they can finally join those dots and make sense of themselves again. Because what we've lost here, it's not knowledge, it's a sense of trust. And that trust that the next step will actually make a difference. So that's what I'm going to help you discover in the next few minutes today. I'm going to walk you through these next 3 shifts. I'd like to share with you some real stories from women I've worked with over the years as well, who have kindly given me permission to share their experiences, but I've decided not to share their names or their identifying details because I really want to respect and honour their privacy. But the stories are real because I think seeing what these shifts can look like in someone's life might offer you some insight into yours. So let's explore. So shift 1, fighting your body to working as one. What is your body really asking for? So this is one of the first shifts I noticed. Almost every woman who comes to see me has spent years trying harder, trying to be more disciplined, more consistent, more motivated, trying to push through tiredness, ignoring aches and pains, starting again every Monday, because that's what we've been taught. If something isn't working, try harder, push more, be stricter, have more willpower. But over the years, I've started wondering whether that's even the right question to start with. What if trying harder isn't really what your body needs? What if your body isn't fighting against you or letting you down? What if it's actually trying to protect you all along? And I think for a long time, we've been taught to treat our body a bit like a problem to solve, something to fix, something to control, perhaps something to push into what we want it to do. But I've noticed something very different. The body rarely asks to be fixed. It's simply asking to be understood, to be met, to be supported. And one of the women whose story that has stayed with me came to me with a chronic illness that zapped her energy and stopped her from working. She'd reached a point where she no longer trusted her body to meet the demands of everyday life. She went on a journey of trying to fix herself, finding problem after problem. As soon as she felt like she'd fixed one thing, the next thing came along, depleting her energy with every round of trying. Every decision felt like a negotiation. Will I have enough energy? Will I pay for this tomorrow? Alongside that was more feelings, that quiet belief that she's never quite done enough. And what she longed for wasn't perfection, it was freedom. Freedom to make choices without constantly second-guessing herself. Freedom to stop living a battle within her own body. And we didn't need to find a better way to fight. We built a different relationship with her body. She began learning how to work with her body instead of against it. Movement became something that helped her feel steady rather than something she had to force herself through. She began trusting her body again, and today she's living a life for a long time she didn't think was possible. And I'm not sharing this story because I think everyone has the same experience. Perhaps you don't have a long-term health condition. Maybe your story is navigating menopause, burnout, pain, stress, or just simply feeling exhausted all the time. The details are different, but the pattern is there, it's the same. Somewhere along the way, we've learnt to believe that if we're struggling, we just need to try harder. But I've found something very different. Real strength is not about winning the fight with your body. It's about building a relationship where you no longer need to fight at all. Now let's move into shift 2. Trying to fix everything, to joining the dots. So this second shift I've noticed is something that is present by the time most women come to see me. They've been carrying a long list of things that they think they need to fix. They want more energy, better sleep, less pain, maybe to feel stronger or even to lose weight. They want to feel calmer and they want to eat better. They kind of know that's something that would be supportive. But what they really want is to stop overthinking and to feel more like themselves again. And it's no wonder people feel overwhelmed when everything feels disconnected. It can feel like everything needs fixing. And that's often where people become stuck, not because they've lost touch or because they don't know what they're doing, not because they're not trying, but sometimes they just don't know where to begin. And I know that feeling myself, even with my training as a dietitian. There were plenty of points where I realised I knew a lot about health, but I don't know what I needed most at that time anyway. And I was looking in so many different places without seeing the whole picture. But over the time I've been running my coaching business, that's become one of the biggest things I've noticed. It's almost never just one thing, but it's almost never everything either. And the work isn't about fixing every part of your life. It's about joining the dots so you can understand what's happening and discover what will actually make the biggest difference right now. Another woman I worked with spent years trying to make sense of her body. It just all felt incredibly unpredictable to her. Again, she'd read the books, listened to the podcasts, researched, experimented. She wasn't lacking information. She'd worked incredibly hard to understand what was going on. And what she needed wasn't really another idea. It was someone to bring everything together. And at the end of our session, she said, something I'll never forget. I feel like you've helped me join the dots. And that wasn't because we had all the answers. It was because once the whole picture became clearer, she finally knew where to begin. And I think that's what so many of us are really looking for. Not another perfect plan or a list of things that we should be doing, just enough clarity to understand ourselves and trust that next step. Next we have shift 3, from looking back to moving forward. Now this third shift is perhaps the one I hear the most often. And if you're anything like the women I work with, you might find yourself saying things like, I just want to get back to myself, back to the body you had in your 20s or 30s perhaps, back to having more energy, back to feeling lighter, back to feeling more confident and mostly just like you again. And honestly, it's completely understandable. When life feels uncertain, we naturally look for a familiar reference point. We remember a time when we felt freer, more connected to ourselves, like life had more possibilities, like we had more choice. So it's no surprise that you find yourself reaching for the strategies that worked back then. Perhaps you've started cutting calories again. Perhaps you've been booking back-to-back fitness classes or trying to become more disciplined, using pressure, and maybe even sometimes using shame to try and become the person you remember being. But the thing is here, those strategies, they helped you meet the needs of a very different season of your life. They got you here, but they may not be the things that help you move forward from here, because life has changed, your body has changed, and perhaps when you really stop and think about it, your values have changed too. Now, the women I work with often begin by talking about wanting to lose weight or get back to an earlier version of themselves. But as we spend time together, something really interesting happens. We begin to realise they aren't just longing for a different body, they're longing for a different relationship with their life, more freedom, choice, more energy to do things that matter to them. Another woman I worked with said something really interesting in our very first conversation, and it's really stuck with me. As we were discussing what she wanted out of her life, what her journey had brought her to so far, she smiled and she had this little glint in her eye and she said, I've always wanted to start my own business. And then she almost laughed at herself because she thought she'd said something a little bit silly. And we didn't spend the next year building a business. That wasn't really the goal. We spent the next year helping her reconnect with herself. Food became nourishment instead of another test she could pass or fail. Movement became a way of caring for herself instead of proving herself. Little by little, she stopped asking, what should I do? And became far more interested in what feels right for me. And that quiet longing she'd almost dismissed became something she trusted enough to follow. And today she does have that business, but that's not really the point of this whole story. It's that she always knew that there was something more. But it was only when she stopped clinging on to her old version of herself, that old life, before she could really start to look forward. So maybe for you, it's not having a vision of a business. Maybe it is changing career or travelling, or perhaps returning to a hobby you've talked about for years that perhaps you had to put down when life got busy. Maybe it's simply having the confidence to say no without feeling guilty. Well, whatever it is, I don't think you need to see the whole path today. It's just about getting some more clarity. What is your next step? Because that's how lasting change grows. One step, one choice, and one conversation at a time. So if you've recognised yourself in what I've shared today, you probably don't need another plan. You probably don't need someone to tell you to try harder, and you certainly don't need another list of things that you think you should be doing. What would really help you here is this opportunity to pause, to understand what's really happening, to join the dots. And that's exactly why I created the Embodied Strength Profile. During our 90 minutes together, we will explore how you move, how you breathe, and how your body responds to the demands of everyday life. We'll look at your health, your habits, your values, and the life you're trying to build, not as separate conversations, but as one connected picture. Because when we see the whole picture, we can stop scattering your precious time, focus, and energy trying to fix everything. And instead, we can decide together where that precious time, focus, and energy are best spent. There's no pass or fail here. It's not about judging where you are, only what is available to you now, and perhaps what you might want when you start to take those steps. Just understanding yourself more clearly. And what you get to leave with is knowing what exactly is going to make that biggest difference to you, that next step that you can trust. And if you're local, we can do this together, still space Hull. And if you live further away, we can absolutely do all of this online. Either way, the conversation is just as rich. The patterns are still there. We can still join those dots together. So if you found yourself recognising pieces of your own story in what I've shared today, perhaps this is your crossroads. And what I'd really love for you to take away from this is that you don't have to know the whole journey. You don't need all the answers. You just need somewhere to begin. And if you'd like me to be your guide as you begin making sense of where you are now, I'd love to welcome you into the Embodied Strength Profile. You'll find everything you need over at carlykillen.com. So if you head over to the contact page and just ask me about the Embodied Strength Profile, I'll put the link in the comments box below. Have a read, take your time, and if it does feel like the right next step, I'd love to hear from you. Because sometimes the biggest change in our lives don't begin with having all the answers. They begin with curiosity and one trusted next step.